But so the biggest story that everybody was talking about, and I didn't get the chance to really do research last night, in terms of like watching videos and knowing the actual outcome as to like the ruling for this, but Cale's goal in game one
Yes.
that
So
went through an offside review that we know these offside reviews take forever anymore.
I'll explain this the best way that I can because I've done a pretty decent amount of research on it.
I do want to say
Uh,
this. I pulled up a PDF of the NHL's official rule book on this.
that's amazing.
So
Yeah,
basically, Rule 83 is offside, right? Position of the player's skates and not that of a stick shall be the determining factor in all instances for deciding offside. So they're looking at the skates at all times.
yes. And they changed it recently, I believe, after the Avalanche Sharks incident where Landeskog was offside.
Oh, the
And then,
bench thing?
well, also it was just like they changed like after that happened, they decided to modify the rules a little bit. And one of the rules is like you can pick up your skate.
Uh-huh. Oh, yeah, the line goes to the ceiling,
Yes.
essentially, is what I've heard it phrased like.
Yes. So they wanted to make it a little bit easier and a little bit more lenient. So I guess less goals would be call offside because it would make it a little bit easier to tag up and stuff like that. Um, but this one's interesting because they got the call right.
Mm-hmm.
However, the frustration to me is not that they got it right, it's that nobody knows what the fucking rule is.
Nobody knows. How can you be how can you be a hardcore fan of this sport? How can you be a new fan to this sport?
We watched that game together, kind of. We were texting while it happened,
Uh-huh.
and I don't know if we like directly talked about it, but like I watched that thing happen, and then I saw the replay, and I was like, "Oh, that's easily offside. That'll take like 2 seconds." And then they called it a goal, and I was like, "Well, that's stupid. That
Well,
is
so
absolutely not a goal." And then I get explanations. I listen to Elliot Friedman on it. You look more at the rule book, and then you realize, okay, they got it right, but can you please, for the love of God, explain the fucking rules to your fans? Because I've been watching hockey for well over a decade now. It's my
I've been
favorite
watching for
one I
over
pay attention
half.
to the
Yeah.
most. And I did not know that.
So
I've
like
done several podcasts about it. We're over 50
yeah,
podcasts.
yeah, in terms of ours, yeah.
So like, there's no reason that a fan like me should know. And if a fan like me isn't gonna know that, how in the world do you expect to get new fans?
So one thing I want to touch on before we rant about that part more is I want to say that part of people's arguments were 83.3, which is the delayed offside.
Because tagging up, because Nichush gets tagging up in that situation.
Yeah. Nichushkin, it was, yeah, we were looking at tag up play. It's kind of like the Jimmy, it's kind of like the Kevin Hayes, Joel Farabee thing from a couple of years ago, too.
Yes, very similar to that one.
Jimmy Hayes was, I don't know why I keep saying Jimmy. Rest in peace, Jimmy, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, but Kevin was flying in, or no, wait, Farabee was flying in. Kevin Hayes knew he had to come back and tag up.
Yes.
But then his stick, he realized that he was crossing beforehand. So he had to lift his stick in order to make sure that the puck was crossing first.
Yes.
Is essentially what I'm trying to remember out of the Kevin Hayes, Joel Farabee thing.
Mm-hmm.
um, If an offside call is delayed, the linesman shall drop his arm to nullify the offside violation and allow play to continue. If everybody clears the zone at the same time, permitting the attacking player re-enters the attacking zone and the defending team passes or carries the puck into the neutral zone. So yes, tagging up is one of those things that like explaining it verbally is weird.
It's very weird. It's hard to do. Explaining hockey, I've realized over the years, is complicated. It's a very complicated sport.
There are over 100 rules.
Yes.
How and that
And a lot
involves
of them are subjective.
yeah, especially even when you're dealing with two officials and two linesmen. And it's the linesman's job. Offsides are a linesman's job.
Yeah, they don't have to worry about like making calls or stuff like that. They're just out there being like, yeah, that was good.
I
And they're
mean,
correct, like
they
90
can
times.
they can wave at a ref and be like, hey, you kind of missed this.
Yes, it's not their job to call plays, but they can absolutely um step in and be like, yo, this dude kind of got a stick to the nose. Uh,
this,
that's it.
this goalie kind of got his eye poked out.
Yeah.
But in terms of it being a good goal, how? I don't, because I didn't get to really see the play either.
So what happens is Nichus gets tagging up.
Uh-huh.
As he is tagging up, Makar doesn't have possession. They deemed when he had on a stick, he lifts his stick a little bit. So the puck's gliding.
Mm-hmm.
His stick's not far away from the puck. People are arguing that that's possession. And to an extent, I understand that argument of like, well, if he doesn't have the puck, then who has it? Is it just a
Right.
loose puck? The puck is not even 2 feet away from him. He had just had it on his stick. He's not passing it.
He's
So
not in control of it, but at the same time,
he's kind of in control of it. Like, you know? So, and that's
and
where,
that
like,
just reminds me of
it's a major
another
gray
brutal
area.
offside call. If we're gonna like expand talking about never understanding offsides or goalie interference or whatever the hell rule you want to throw in there, goalie interference is always a fun one.
Mhm.
Um, what was it? It was Charlie Coyle was another one that took forever to get right and wrong.
Yeah.
Um, he was receiving a pass with his skate, and it was like right along the blue line when it touched his blade. And then he bobbled it a little bit, and they still ruled it a good goal.
Here's what the NHL needs to do, and I'm not sure they're willing to do it.
They're
I
them willing to do anything.
I understand they want to get the calls right.
Uh-huh.
And I don't want to say I'm anti getting the call right.
Well, no, neither am I. I want I want the game to be called consistently. I want the game to be called by the rules.
Whether it's the officials reviewing something themselves or a team challenging a call,
Mm-hmm.
there needs to be a clock,
Yes.
5 minutes. And if you can't come to a conclusive decision in 5 minutes, the call
Not even 5 minutes, Jay. Dude,
I think 5 minutes is fair because
5 is fair, but
I
like
think five
even
is fair.
just
I think
3 is
anywhere shorter than that is kind of a gray area to me. Because I
can't
think
take.
that there should be discussion. I don't think 5 minutes is too egregious, but if it takes 9 minutes to make a fucking call, then like you clearly
Then what are you doing?
like come on.
Are you even looking at your little Tamagotchi? Are you looking at
Like what
anything?
are the discussions?
Because they are like just kind of looking at it on like a PSP,
based?
right?
Oh god, I missed the PSP. What an era that was.
Yeah, it was so
But
good.
like, yeah, no, you're looking at it on, your small little stupid thing that you look at. Toronto obviously can get involved, but Toronto's like they're paying attention to all the games. It's not like you had to call someone and be like, "Oh, I hope they pick up." Like they're gonna pick up.
Right.
So like 5 minutes, I think, is more than fair enough
When
to
the
be
horn of God
if you
sounds,
want
right?
and be like, "This is the perspective we're getting here from up in the control room."
Mm-hmm.
Like I think 5 minutes is a fair amount, and if you can't make a call in 5 minutes, then you're just gonna go with whatever the call was on the ice.
more offsides. There was a Devils game, right? There was the Devils Islanders game a couple of years ago that had an offside goal from PK in overtime that took over 4 minutes to review.
I ain't gonna lie, it was Devils Islanders, so I did not watch that game. But
Literally, like you have guys like Jesper Bratt just kind of like sitting on the edge of the bench, just waiting to know what the hell's going on.
Now, the reason that I think that this was the correct call, even though I'm infuriated that it took as long as it did, Elliot Friedman explained this really well. Leave it to Friedge to explain anything.
Leave it to Friedger.
The reason that I like it is not because he didn't go up and just like try to explain it as best as he could. He found a comparison. So
always nice. Always nice.
And he used the comparison to explain this is what's happening. This is what they're looking at. So the comparison was from a game last year, and it's from Arizona Coyotes legend Michael Bunting. It was the game he had a hat trick in against the LA Kings. It was
Calder nominee Michael Bunting.
Waiting for someone to tag up so he can enter the offensive zone. And while he's doing it, he lifts his stick as the puck's gliding so he can get into the offensive zone while the player's tagging up. And he explained it in a way that, like, it's very, very clear that Michael Bunting knew the rule.
Right.
When he did it, he was like, it says seemingly a lot of players are confused by the rule, which right then and there, you should know that you should probably have a fucking meeting or something so the players know what the fucking rule is.
You should at least, yeah.
But he said it's very clear in this situation, based on how the play went, that Michael Bunting knows the rule, and he's making a play with the puck based off of that, waiting for his teammate to tag up while still being able to get into the offensive zone and make a play with the puck, and he eventually scores.
Right.
And the Kings were infuriated that it was called off. They had no clue why it was called off. why it was called a goal after they challenged.
This isn't the Makar one in particular. I don't think is an argument for make the officials available for comment post game, which a lot of people do argue, and I would be fine with that.
I would too. I don't think that's a case because, again,
mostly you get that from actual like physical infractions, right?
Yes, from making a call that people just totally disagree with. Because this wasn't a call that they made that people disagreed with. This was a bang bang play. They let it happen. There was a goal scored, and then they did a review after a coach's challenge. And Toronto was absolutely involved in that process. Right. To me, this isn't a situation where, the refs need to be available. This is a situation where Toronto needs to be available and to explain to us as fans, this is the reason that we made this call. This is what we were looking at. This is what we saw. This is why this was a goal. And another thing that Friedge mentioned that I thought was interesting is that today, and I listened to this, I think probably like either yesterday or the day before that, he said that generally speaking, Edmonton was okay with the call. They were infuriated at first. They went back. They looked over everything. They got an explanation from the league, and they were satisfied with the explanation. So they always aren't going to be crying about this. And the reason that they're not is because they're going to be in a situation, I think, where now that they know this and are fully aware that all the players are aware of this, it may be something that they try to take advantage of.
Right. Now they know how to proceed with planning entries and planning this kind of thing.
It's a game changer for entries. It's not a play that you're going to see super often in the league, but if you can pull it off 1 to 2 times a night in a 60-minute game, you do that for 82 games, or even say if you play like 25 games in the playoffs, it might end up resulting in a goal or two. So that's absolutely a game changer in my mind if you change your strategy that way. I wouldn't be surprised if teams this offseason started to practice that a little bit. Like this is a situation we need to practice this so our players are aware of this. So maybe, who knows, maybe we can get like an extra scoring opportunity a game if we're, utilizing this, or even if it's not an extra scoring opportunity a game, maybe it's an extra scoring opportunity every 3 games. And that might be the difference between scoring a goal or not. And that goal might be the difference between making the playoffs or not. You never know. It's a long
Right.
season. So you need to be able to take advantage of any opportunity you can get.
I still just think there's, I guess, to kind of wrap up the review part of it, I just want to be able to watch a game and celebrate a goal when it's happening.
There's nothing worse than watching a game and seeing a goal and being like, I'm sure this is going to be reviewed, and you can't even celebrate it.
We talked about this with the new fan thing, right? Like, there's so many fucking rules.
Yeah.
To the point where you're trying to explain, like, let's say, I remember I took my cousin who, we're around the same age. So he understood the game of hockey for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
He had just never been to an NHL game.
Right.
So we went to Columbus, Carolina, because he lives in Raleigh.
Was that
he lives in Charlotte.
Was that in Columbus?
It was, yeah.
Was that the 7-4 game?
I can't remember.
Okay.
I can't remember off the top of my head, but it was like, we had a good time. We went to BD's, all of that. I know your spot, right?
I'm hungry, man.
But we went and so it was nice that I didn't have to explain anything really. Mm-hmm. But when you go in with somebody that's never been to a hockey game and you're trying to explain, like, okay, so this is this kind of play, there's goalies can do this and players can do this, and this is a penalty, this is a penalty, this is a penalty. And then something like an offside goal happens, or like when people just don't understand what an offside is in hockey, and then they just blow the whistle in the middle of a play, and they're like, what happened? And you're like, I think it was an offside. I'm not entirely sure.
So
even when you're not sure when an actual offside happens.
I have a funny story for you about taking a friend to a hockey game.
Uh-huh.
My best buddy, Kevin, he's, he watches like football and basketball. Those are his two sports. He doesn't really watch hockey.
Yeah, hockey and baseball here. Yeah, so.
I took him to Blue Jackets, Blackhawks in the 1920 season.
Oh no, you took him to that game.
That was the game. I had 2 tickets for him, and I was like, "Hey, let's go."
Oh, so you saw the
yeah, we were there, and it was amazing because like he's not like he's been to a few like Cleveland Monsters games, so he's like picked up a few things like. Mm-hmm. He's not like he knows to an extent
very basic hockey rules.
He knows to an extent icing and stuff like that, but like there's a lot of like general things that he doesn't know. And it was funny because he kind of looked at me like after the Werenski goal in overtime, and he was like, "You shot the puck before time hit 0. Why isn't that a goal?" And I'm like, "It's not like basketball where if you shoot the puck before the buzzer goes off and it goes in, it's a goal. Like it has to be over the line before clocks hit 0." And he just looks at me. He's like, "Well, that's fucking stupid."
Yeah, it's the Calgary 04 argument, right? Parallax.
Yeah, and then like he goes through shit out, they lose, and then we're listening to the because I'm driving back, so I turned on was it 97.1? I think it is in Columbus. So
the fan is 97.1, yes.
And Torts' press cut, his post game, 30 seconds. He's explaining everything. And Kevin just looks at me. He's like, "So the refs just didn't reset the clock after time went off?" And I was like, "Basically, yeah." And he's
Twice.
Like, "As a result, we lost the game and we lost the goalie." And I was like, "You'd be correct." And he's like, "That's a dumb fucking thing to happen." He's like, "This is kind of stupid."
They didn't reset the clock twice.
Yeah.
Because there was a fraction. There was the smallest fraction. And then they lost another full second because they were just negligent.
It was like 1.1 second came off the clock because they just didn't, it didn't stop in time by the time that, they registered the icing.
But the first stoppage that was like, they lost like what, 0.2 of a second? So 0.3 of a second? If they added that little 1.4,
they literally win that game and Corpusalo never gets hurt.
Yeah.
Now, granted, it didn't ruin anything in the grand scheme of things. We still made the playoffs, but
eventually,
it's still the frustration of the Blue Jackets could have missed the playoffs that year, and the explanation for why they would have missed the playoffs could have legitimately been the game that they didn't win against Chicago because of the stubbornness of the officials. But the general point here that I'm trying to make is
Mm-hmm.
you have a guy who does like sports but hasn't really gotten into hockey because Columbus is 2 hours away.
Yep.
And generally speaking, like usually people aren't going to be diehard fans of a minor league team unless you're a diehard hockey fan to begin with.
Unless you're
So,
attacked.
he wants, he wants to get into the sport a little bit more. I think into a game, and you have a couple things that happen in a game, and he has no fucking clue what's going on. And it's not a situation that's easy to explain, like maybe in baseball, like, oh, the reason that this is a home run is because it hit this part of the outfield wall where it's slightly above this, so they deem that a home run or stuff like that. Like, it's easy with baseball to explain. Generally speaking, it's easy with basketball to explain. Oh, his foot was slightly on the line, so it's a 2-pointer rather than a 3-pointer. I won't say for football. Football and hockey are in the same position because there's a lot of rules, a lot of things that happen, generally speaking, in games. We never fucking know. Does anybody know what a catch is? Does anybody know what onside is?
Does anybody know?
Onside and goalie interference have become the what the fuck is a catch in the NHL.
Pass interference.
Pass interference too. My God.
Roughing the passer. There's
Oh God.
so many football rules
so
that
many
are
football
so
rules.
up in the air, just like hockey rules. And you're like,
Mhm.
can we please get a definitive way to call this?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. And
That is consistent from year to year.
Yes. Because, and generally speaking, which of the four major sports has the best refs? We'll use the word refs because there's obviously different names, like umpires, refs, stuff like that. But
officials, we'll go with the blanket term.
Officials. Who is the best officials of the four major sports in North America?
The NBA, obviously.
Absolutely. And you want to know why?
Because the NBA actually knows how to run shit.
And because they hold them accountable, they'll make them available for post game.
Yeah.
And you can talk to them. They can explain calls. They also changed the thing where they
put out written statements, Jay.
They do.
When they fuck up, they put out written statements.
I went to a Cavs Grizzlies game because I hadn't been to a Cavs game in a while, obviously, because I've been living up in Buffalo and COVID affected it. So I went to Cavs Grizzlies and Cavs Suns earlier this year. Both were fun games.
Oh, I'm sure.
And one thing that the NBA changed that I knew that they changed, but I hadn't experienced yet live in person is, they're trying to review something. And what they did was great was rather than going on a mic or having someone explain it, the official walked up to center court where they
the
have
scores table,
the scores table, and he looked directly at him and said, "This is the play that we're reviewing. This is why we're reviewing it, and we're determining if this is a 3-pointer or a 2-pointer, or we're determining if this is a flagrant 1 or a flagrant 2, stuff like that." They explain directly, this is the play, this is what we're looking for, this is what we're trying to determine. And then they go out and they fucking do it. I mean, that league is just miles ahead of the other three.
And then in the NHL, you have all four officials coming together like an amoeba floating over to where
it looks like Gossip Girl.
It's
they're just like, was that a goal? I don't know.
I just think it's funny how they all float. Like you ever notice how they all just float together like a
yes. Yeah, the four people get together in a square and then they just travel together.
It's so fucking weird.
It's like, 4 people sitting in a raft on a water. The raft didn't exist. That's what it looks like.
Yeah, that's exactly what it looks like. Anyway, so getting away from the
baseball's in a tough spot too because you have fucking Angel Hernandez behind home plate for a lot of games.
Still have Angel Hernandez. I want to listen to Joe West's podcast just to hear what he has to say about how he never gave a fuck about the fans.
Yeah, but also Joe West is an asshole because he threw Adrian Beltre out for no reason.